Hello guys, my name is Anna and I'm a Ukrainian. I vlog daily from my country Ukraine since the start of this terrible war with Russia. And in my daily videos I answer your questions and tell you some important stories from our Ukrainian background. And today I want to talk a little bit more about the Ukrainians all Russians call Nazis. Well, it is not difficult to find the meaning of the word Nazi in any dictionary or on Wikipedia, and many of you already know that a Nazi is a supporter of a Nazi regime in Germany that existed in the country at the beginning and in the middle of the 20th century. We all know how it ended in 1945, and of course, the Hitler's regime, the emblems of that period, and the philosophy of that period is forbidden and prosecuted all over the planet. Nazism is definitely not popular in Ukraine because Ukraine was among the countries that suffered the most from Nazis, and actually we fought fiercely against them in the Second World War. But of course, when Russian government, Putin and their military use the word Nazi, they mean something different. And from what I personally see, for a Russian, any Ukrainian who does not want to be Russian and who says, no, we are different, no, we have our culture, no, we have our language, is already a Nazi. So a Nazi in Ukraine for Russian is a person who does not want to be Russian. And now let's look in more detail at the Nazi regime in general and try to find some things in common. Maybe we will see some signs of that in a different country. Well, first of all, Nazis were totally obsessed with their Führer, right? With their leader that ruled the country for a pretty long period of time. In Ukraine, within the last 10 years, we had many elections, a couple of presidents, and since the start of our independence, we had like many of them. And in Russia, what about Russia? There we have one president for 22 years who is quite authoritarian. And then, what about political parties? In Ukraine, we change them very quickly, and there are lots of political parties that can be on the peak in spring and totally in the bottom in autumn. And we change these political parties, they are different, they do not symbolize whole country, and it's very normal. For example, inside the families you have people who support one party, other people support another party, and they all discuss and quarrel during dinners, but that is okay. What about Russia? Well, in Russia we have one active party and it is really large, Единая Россия. And if you want to build any kind of career, even on the regional or local level, you have to be a member of that political party. Doesn't that resemble Nazi regime? Well then, symbolism. We all know that Nazis loved various symbols, swastikas, they loved decorating themselves. They liked parades, they liked the speeches of Hitler that were dedicated to some specific events. In Ukraine, no, we don't have that. We have the colors of our flag, we have our symbols that were always like the national symbols, official, they are on stamps everywhere, but we do not draw swastik or Z letters. And for me, all that symbols of the Russian military operation, they are very vivid and they look very much like swastiks in the Germany. The Nazi regime was extremely militarized. We were not like that in Ukraine, and we don't have any true military units for children, for example, and you cannot see a child in a soldier uniform during the Victory Day, for example, in Ukraine, because for decades it was our idea like to give up nuclear weapons, and it was very common for Ukrainian moms not to buy guns and stuff for children because like no one wanted war. And in Russia, they are totally obsessed with military doctrine. You can see lots of children wearing uniform. You cannot buy something like that in Ukraine. Even now, you won't find a uniform for children because this is sick. Children have to have different kind of games. And of course, the attitude to the victory is totally different. We do not describe our victory in the Second World War as a threat to the world, and Russians like to repeat. We can repeat. This is actually what they like to say during the Victory Day. And this is something totally wrong. Then I am always terrified when I see these small children in Russian cities who lie down on the floor, for example, making that letter. It is totally ugly, and it does not even look strong. It looks totally sick. And like Ukrainian children, they draw pictures with sunflowers and send them with a help to our soldiers, but it is always about peace. It is not about like um, something. I have heard that more and more Ukrainian children say when they pray that is it bad to wish Putin death? And even now in various publics on Facebook, psychologists teach Ukrainians mothers how not to make children aggressive even towards Putin, because they have to live in that beautiful kids' world, even though it's very difficult if they live in bomb shelters for months. But this militarization that is present everywhere in Russian society was something totally unacceptable in Ukrainian. And I'm sure that after we win this war, we will still preserve our attention, and perhaps we will be a more military nation than we were before, but still we will dream to come back to this normal peaceful living and not to attacks of the world. In Nazi Germany, there were lots of censorship everywhere, right? And it is something that we see in Russia very much. And for example, you can get in trouble even if you deny the need of this special operation in Ukraine. So even such words and such phrases can bring person to jail. Perhaps in Ukraine, like there are lots of people saying different things, and freedom of speech is very much developing in Ukraine. Sometimes I think even too much, but I'm not a dictator yet. And also propaganda. Propaganda is everywhere on Russian TV, and maybe I have to record a separate vlog on Russian TV programs, but I don't watch them, but I read a little bit about them. I can watch, but my health does not tolerate that. And propaganda, all these myths that they try to recreate. Top myth of Russian propaganda, that Ukrainian nation does not exist and it is all ein Volk, something very similar that Hitler was saying about Austria, Czech Republic, Poland. This is actually how he started. Also, Hitler went to liberate all these nations, not to occupy them, and this is exactly what Putin does. He liberates Ukrainian people who don't want this kind of liberation. And perhaps this priority of language, culture, it is something very typical for Russia today. And they always try to describe the culture of other nations, not only of Ukraine, but other countries that were once a part of the USSR or close to its borders, as something subordinate, something that cannot be independent. And this is very Nazi-like. Also, during the rule of Hitler in Germany, many intellectuals, many people who were like trying to persuade something wrong was going on, all of these people were prosecuted, were executed. And this is something what happens now and what happened for a couple of years in Russia. All opposition leaders are poisoned, killed. All of their actors, writers, there are not many as for such a large country, but some of them who speak out, who speak about Ukraine, even people who go out on this lonely meetings, one person holding, for example, a poster with a quote from Bible will end up in prison. Doesn't that remind us of Nazis? Then their glorification of their leaders, they have even some kind of imitations of prayers to Putin, and he's everywhere, and you cannot say he's bad. His portraits are everywhere, and we don't have that many portraits with Zelensky, even though we like him honestly right now. And I'm sure that like there are lots of other examples that demonstrate how their people do not want to talk, how they close all cultural centers. For example, in Ukraine, even before the beginning of this war, we had lots of Russian cultural centers that were working with these groups, minorities on the territory of Ukraine. And it goes without saying that, for example, in my city, we have Polish Cultural Center, Czech culture, German, maybe Swedish, I'm not sure. And it's not a big city. And they all lived kind of normally, and perhaps we supported them even more than the Ukrainian cultural centers because they are far away from their motherland and they need some kind of support to preserve this diversity. And there are no Ukrainian cultural centers in Russia. And Ukrainian library, that was just one library, and there, millions of Ukrainians lived on the territory of Russia, and even that library was always checked by FSB. Lots of books were burned and destroyed. And what Russian occupation does right now on the territory of the villages and cities that they have temporarily occupied, they burn books on Ukrainian history, they burn books of Ukrainian literature. And even Taras Shevchenko, who is our greatest poet, who lived like 200 years ago, his monument was shot in the head. So it all demonstrates total hatred to Ukrainian culture, Ukrainian language. I have like spoken Ukrainian and with some Russians like a couple, maybe a decade ago, and they always ask you, can you switch to normal language? So Ukrainian is not normal for them. And Ukrainian, the denial of Ukrainian independence, the denial of Ukrainian culture, and the description of all that as just a wrong kind of Russians that need to be educated. And they see the whole world as like a possible territory of Russia. And this, once again, very much reminds Nazi regime. So to sum it all up, I can tell you that once again, we say that our president is a Russian-speaking Jew. We have never talked about that previously because it did not matter to us at all. Like, at all. It was not an argument for or against him. It was like, okay, he is dark-eyed or blue-eyed. It does not matter here in Ukraine. And that's why we did not talk publicly. And now, even when I use it in my quarrels with some Russian trolls and I tell them we have a Russian-speaking Jew president, I already feel weird because like we never count these things, but we have to. So in Russia, what they have now is a Russist regime, a regime of Putin, total propaganda, total censorship, people who are very poor, badly educated in many districts of Russia that live below the level of poverty. But they are obsessed with one idea, and as Nazis, they are always looking for enemies everywhere. They are not concentrated on the inside affairs, but they are concentrated on the outside affairs, and the whole world is a danger. So, I assure you that Ukrainians are not Nazis, and when I say this phrase, I do feel weird because like when you have to explain something that is obvious, anyway, of course, we have to fight this evil and we have to stop this regime, because the only way to continue normal life, and I'm not only talking about Ukraine, I'm talking about the world in general, is to stop this racism in Russia. And it is going to be a long process, because even after Putin is, I don't know, dead, caught or whatever, there will be millions of people brainwashed with Russian propaganda for whom it will be very difficult to come back to normal reality. Thank you once again for watching. Please like this video if you like this video, and subscribe to my channel to get the updates from Ukraine. Slava Ukraini!